G'day, Luke here from Artisti Coffee Roasters. I just want to give you a bit of info on the video that we're uploading now. It was actually shot last week. It was a live event that we held, and it was a tour of our roastery here. And that was actually in conjunction with TAFE New South Wales, and part of a learning module where the students had to actually develop the advertising, marketing, and run an online event. And that was using the EVENT BRITE software or platform to make bookings and reservations and host the live video. So it was great for students to learn a bit more about the issues you face with audio and video, your internet connections, things like phones going off in the middle of an event. So there's just so many things that can happen. And look, we just wanted to share that with you. It's a great tour. It was about from a coffee bean all the way through our process to making a cup of coffee. We did a milk coffee and a black coffee. So look, guys, just want to share it with you. Hope you enjoy it, and we'd love to hear your feedback if you've got any comments on it. Cheers, have a good one.
Well, it's just got 11 by my time, so we'll see how we go. But obviously, there's a few people still to join. But I think, you know, we could maybe start to say hi to everyone.
Beautiful. Well, welcome everyone. Hello, I'm Luke Floyd, the owner and director of Artisti Coffee Roasters. We are based here on the beautiful Coffs Coast in New South Wales. And I have Jimmy Evans, our sales and marketing manager, with us behind the camera. So say good day, Jimmy.
Hey, everyone.
And welcome to our virtual tour from the coffee bean all the way through to the coffee cup. So we're going to be covering everything in our facility here and giving you a really good insight as to what we do day in and day out. So just a few of the housekeeping things that we want to run through for this virtual tour. If you could please just mute your microphones, and if you can do the video of yourself, just turn that off. That's going to help us with the bandwidth. So that's going to allow a really great stream to you guys. We're going to also be recording this, so this will be used through, it's a co-venture through TAFE, so some students may want to review this, so just want to let you know that is happening for privacy reasons. And we're going to have a couple of question times, so there'll be 2 stages where we'll be able to do that, so please use the comment bar down on the side, the chat bar, to pop in your questions, and we'll get to read those out. The first one will be just after we've finished roasting, so if you can keep those questions up to that point. And then after we make some coffee, we're going to open up and have another question time at the end there. We're going to allocate a good amount of time, so we do want to make sure we get to all of your questions. And at the end of the session, look, we'll be around a little bit longer as well to answer any questions. We are very active as a coffee company on our socials. So we do have an Instagram, Facebook, and an amazing YouTube channel, which actually will dive into all the different assets, features of what we're talking about today. So you can learn a lot more about making coffee or roasting or what we do as a company. So definitely check out that channel. I think we're going to continue from here. So who is Artisti? Well, I developed Artisti Coffee Roasters back in 2009. Prior to that, I studied hospitality. I'm actually a graduate of the Coffs Harbour Hospitality Diploma course in 2000. And from then, I've gone on to work in different restaurants and cafes all along the east coast of Australia. And from a development of having my own cafe in Sawtell with my wife, who is a chef, I had a focus on coffee. And from there, we ended up being able to buy a coffee roaster. And that all happened in 2009. And from here, we've just grown from very humble beginnings to offering amazing different things in the coffee industry. We now support in New South Wales and go up to Brisbane. We're trying to head a little bit more north. But why are we different? And we have a few things that are really standing out in the industry. We do offer just a humble coffee bean, and it's a great product, which you're going to hear more about. But we are offering a lot more with coffee machines, not only in the sale, but also the service into the cafes. We are a developer of an innovative product called iMilk, which is an automatic milk delivery system, which we'll touch on a little bit. That is developed here in Coffs Harbour and is now sold all over the world. We offer training packages and cafe support and some coffee, some business coaching specific to our industry. So we will do things like layouts or design of workflows in cafes, helping people with menus and how to be a profitable business. So that's a huge asset to our customers. And with Jimmy coming on board, he's going to touch base a little bit on graphic design, digital marketing services. And that's been a real big growth for us in our business. So I'll be excited to hear from Jimmy a little bit later. And a year and a half ago, we hit into the YouTube channel market. We had a big year last year trying to push hard into that area with not a huge amount of success, but Christmas last year, it boomed. And from then on, we've been putting up amazing content, which is going all over the world, getting amazing feedback. So again, definitely keep an eye out in that area. So from here, we're going to start the tour. So come on board, guys, as we head around our facility. We're going to pop outside because we do have some beautiful coffee trees here. So this is a Bourbon Dwarf. It is a specific variety that is actually not designed to be in Australia. The Australian coffee tree is actually supposed to be what's called a K7. But these are a couple of trees I got from up near the Yamba area from the Woomba estate. And you can see here that we do have these little green cherries. And they grow down each stem. And this will not grow any larger as a tree. That's why it's a dwarf. It's very easy to pick and work with. Now, these aren't ripe enough to work with, but I will show you what happens. These will ripen individually from a yellow to a slight orangey colour, then they go ruby red. And we want to pick those individually. And when they are picked, I will try and dissect this one. I know it's going to be very, very hard. They are like a little rock. Once they're ruby red and you can pop them, oh, very hard to work on that one. Here we go. So there is a mucilage that's in here. Cherry will come off. It is very slippery, very slimy. So this is one of the processes. Oh, I can't get the other half out of there. But that is half a green bean. Now what needs to happen is that needs to be fermented to get all that mucilage off. And that will allow it to become what's called parchment, which is like a pistachio nut. We then have to dry that and remove that outer layer, and then we polish it because there is a thing called silver skin in there, which is a very fine layer over that bean. And at that point, that's how we receive the beans ready to roast. So from the point of a coffee cherry, if we had 10 kilos of the coffee cherry, we're going to end up with about 1.5 kilos of usable green bean. And so that is why it is profitable to have these beans grown in countries over the world that have a lower economic system. Because in Australia, it's very hard for us to produce the coffee in volumes because our growing climates don't actually allow for good quality beans. There's definitely not the heritage that we have here, and we don't have the altitudes where coffee is typically grown. And it is typically grown in a third above and below the equator. So we're talking things like Southern Americas, into Indonesia. We typically get a lot of Guatemalans, Colombians, Costa Ricans, PNG beans, but we don't use an Australian product. The yields and the quality just aren't there that have the heritage from around the world. So there's huge loss all the way through those processes. And there is more loss to come. So there is a huge amount of weight loss in a coffee cherry. And we'll go through and we'll talk about that a little bit more. This is our lovely facility here. Lovely, nice and fresh. Jimmy's responsible for all of our lovely branding and look. But we do everything. We've got all of our packaging in branded products. And these are our green beans stored here. So we get everything in pallets per origin or bean from one particular part around the world. So we've got some Colombian there, some Brazil, some PNG, another Colombian product here as well. We have obviously organics and decaps and so on. And we're going to be roasting those, and it takes a lot of care to roast beans individually. So our facility, which we're going to go through now, is an IMF roasting plant. This is an amazing bit of kit. I'll just point out over here, Jimmy, we do have a small little shop roaster there, the 10 kilo. And everyone's going to be familiar with that kind of roaster if you see them out and about. But they are a gas burner, like a barbecue burner underneath. And the beans turn in a washing drum essentially and rotate, and that heat gets applied to the bean. And then from there, you're going to have a little bit of a measurement. This beast behind us, this is like the Formula One of race cars, where another old roaster might be like a V8. And I'll get back to that in a minute. This is a loading scale. So this whole plant allows us to not have to touch the beans from the start to the finish. We can load in here a 30 kilo batch. It will then make its way up via vacuum and come through into our top hopper. So Jimmy's just going to make his way around here, and we can see it's all digitally controlled, but we're going to come back and talk about that a little bit more, and we do graph everything on a laptop. What happens is we load in one origin. Let's say it's a Colombian bean. It's going to fall into the roasting drum, which is here, and we can sample and check that. Now, this roaster doesn't have a gas burner underneath. It actually has a burner which is at 600 degrees at the back, and we can allocate fan-forced heat into this very precisely. So most people, when they're looking at roasters, can only have very small control. And if I relate that to a car, you might have 5 speeds in your car, and you can make 5 gears or 5 changes to the heat, the airflow, the drum speed, and how that's going to affect a bean. We actually have technically a 14-speed car, and it allows us to control the input temperature when we're dropping the beans in, and 12 stages along there and a finishing stage. So there is a huge amount of control that we can use to go around a racetrack essentially. As the beans come out, this is actually an oversized cooling tray. So if you ever want to think about maybe blanching vegetables, you cook them, and some beans, let's say, you cook them in boiling water and you chuck them into ice water to stop that cooking process immediately because you want to use them in a salad. That's what we're doing here. We're really snap freezing them and cooling those beans down rapidly because we know we've baked them perfect and we don't want them to keep cooking outside that process. As we come through, a lot of roasters don't have what's called a destoner. Now, in third world countries or where coffee's grown, essentially, there is the beans are laid out along the ground. And then they're going to be on a concrete or even a bit of a dirt style surface. And you've got workers that are working there all day. So there's bits and pieces. We get nails, we get rocks, we get we've had look at amazing different things, bullet shells, but all of those goodies don't end up into your cup of coffee. They end up into this catch tray. We've had teeth, to be honest, which was very surprising to get some little Guatemalan man's teeth. It's a bit of fun there, but essentially it separates anything other than coffee from the bean. And that is a huge issue with a lot of cafes where those parts go into your coffee grinder and can break your grinder. From here, because we're roasting one bean individually, we're not adding them all together like a Brazilian, a Colombian, and a Guatemalan and roasting them all together. We can individually roast those beans to be perfect. We can choose to dump them out, or we can send them up through this tube into a collection hopper up the top up here, which allows us to have a recipe. So we can put about 120 kilos of coffee up here at a time, and that could be 4 different beans from around the world making a blend of coffee. There is a different blending process here. So it's like a very large front loaded coffee washing machine, and it will spin and blend those beans in beautifully. Once they're blended, they'll pop into our large catch tray here, which we then can suck up into our automated packing system. So again, it's great not being able to have to manually touch any of these beans, and at this time with some COVID, it's great to be able to point out what's happening. Nice and health and safety concepts there. Jimmy's just pointing out our linear weigher. So everything is weighed very precisely. We're 1 gram over in any bag that we do. This can essentially have a kilo or 250 gram bag or even 500 gram bag. So it's a very precise way for us to pack. And then we've got our little packing station here. We do actually run a couple of brands and we do some contract roasting. So we have specific products for specific customers outside of our Artisti label as well. We have some pre-roasted product as a percentage because age of coffee and how you're dealing with that in a cafe is very, very particular. And Jimmy's going to make his way back around here for a second as we go a little bit more into the roasting process. So this is our, I guess, our map of what's happening in the actual roaster. And you can see there's lots of different sections, but essentially this is our burner, which will be roasting at 600 degrees. And we can force that heat into our roasting drum. At this point, we can be measuring that temperature as well. And then it will come out to the cooling tray, go through the destoner I mentioned. We can know where it's full and what bean it would be. That's a Colombian batch 1, which is 30 kilos. And as it comes out here, we go into our second screen, which then shows how it's vacuuming up, whether we're going to put it out into a tub for a single origin coffee, or whether we're going to be going up to the hopper and have a blend and come out into the tubs. So it's a beautiful system, gives us full control, and here is a recipe. So before I was talking about the multiple gears that we could have in a coffee, we have what's called our waiting temperature, and then our first temperature that allows us to drop in our beans. We can adjust things like the air temperature here, our drum speed, and the airflow speed. And then we have different temperatures where we're actually making that change. You can see the 12 individual points there as well. So what we're doing is we are making the perfect, let's call it mud cake. And we've got the fan forced oven, but we're actually baking it beautifully on the outside to get that nice little bit of crunch on the outside. But on the inside, it's not going to be that sloppy, muddy cake that you have in there sometimes. We're baking from the inside out. And we're removing moisture. So when we get a green bean, we are assessing that bean. And when we roast it, we're gaining volume because at a point in the roast, it will actually double in size. But it is taking out the moisture from the bean, which is caramelizing the sugars, changing the acidity levels in that bean as well, and the carbohydrates in the bean. So there are specific areas where we can control the heat and the airflow and what's happening in that bean to get the specific flavor that we want. And that's outlined here in our roaster. So this is our roasting software, and it tells a graph of what's happening. So we're getting all the data from that drum and the bean as it's roasting. The red line here is our heat that we're allocating in. It goes off the charts because we do put a fair bit of heat in there. This blue line here is the actual bean and how it's reacting on its temperature. And this other lighter blue line is the rate of rise per minute. So we can be getting it very hot very quickly. As you can see, we do, because when we put the beans in, they have to absorb the heat and go from a temperature that they're happy with to remove the moisture out. And then at that point, they will then be positively charged by the energy we're going to be putting in. And that is what's happening here. And it's called the turning point. Our turning point, we're dropping at this roast. This is actually an Ethiopian, which we did this week. We roast Mondays just out of curiosity. And we dropped it in at 136 degrees. It had a negative impact, but at 103 degrees and 1 minute 55, the turning point happened. That means that we are having a positive impact and adding more energy inside that bean. We keep doing that at a beautiful growth all the way up to 165 degrees. And you can see here it's happened at 7 minutes 25, and that's indicated here in the green zone. That is our drying section. So we are taking 11 minutes, or 47.3% of the roast is about drying those beans out and getting to the moisture content where we're going to have some really specific things happening. There's so many, as I said, acids and carbohydrates and sugars that we're going to be focusing on. And in this stage here, which is the light yellow section, this is the next stage where we're going to be getting rid of bad acids. We're going to bring those beautiful apple acidities in, or an apricot acidity. We're going to go from a white sugar up to a caramel or even a toffee flavor by changing those sugars inside this part of the roast here. And then this is actually called the Maillard reaction that's happening in here. And we're only doing that for 4 minutes and 20 seconds, or 27.7% of the roast. So that is really where we're focusing on the specifics that we know we can get out of a particular bean from a particular origin. just like a red apple, green apple, all of those different color apples around Australia, we know have different flavors. But this is where we can manipulate those flavors. What happens at 11 minutes, 45 seconds is the first crack. Now that is when that bean, if you ever look at one, I'll show you in a second, actually explodes. And that has a significant impact. The internal structure of the bean is going to change. The cell walls are going to change. There's tiny little air pockets everywhere. And that's really going to have a breakdown of the bean. And then the last section here is the finishing stage, where we're going to be making that bean either a dark roast, a medium, or a light roast. So we can be doing that very slowly, very gently, not to try and add too much heat in this section because it's just been expanded and blown up. We don't want to be creating huge changes in here. But for about 3 minutes 55, we are monitoring all of those different heats and really slowly baking for quite a 25% of the actual roast time. You can see here it's at 15 minutes 40 for our end, and you may be able to pick it up, but there's a very faint line behind everything. You can see it quite clearly up in here. Okay, and there's a very, very close line following the whole graph, and a couple of slight time changes, but not by much, and that is our background. This software and this roaster allows us to be repeatable week in, week out, the same product every single time. And that is what is amazing, consistency in the quality that we can get. So where do we go from here? We're going to have a look at the table. Jimmy's going to zip around. So what we've got here is a couple of different beans. We'll actually just start here with our green bean. So this is what it essentially looks like. It's a hard rock. You can't do anything with it. And you can see that it has a bit of a greeny and greyish tinge. The grey is the moisture content. You can see here there's a little bit of silver skin still on those beans, and that's going to come off when we roast. This product here, anyone guess? Very different to green bean. It hasn't been roasted yet. It's decaf. So decaf comes to us already processed with the caffeine taken out, still as a green bean. You can see it's been so processed that it does actually look like a roasted bean. But what they've done is they've removed all of those, the caffeine and other flavors from that actual bean, and then they add the flavors back in by using water. We use no chemicals. We don't source chemically removed decaf products. So it is actually a very tasty product. And if you treat this beautiful with all of those heat processes I was talking about in roasting, you can get a great product. And we do pride ourselves on an amazing decaf. We don't just throw it in and roast it, which some people talk about. Now, just to come back one step with the green bean, here we have a moisture analyzer. So when we get our green bean in, we want it to be between 10 and 11% moisture. So we know from out in the tree there was all those stages of loss of water and parchment, and then it's got to be dried. And if it's too dry, we're not going to be able to have the input that we want to in that product. We don't want to be paying for too much moisture either. So we do analyze our samples. We have all of our product contracted out for a whole year, and it gives us amazing stability, being able to not only contract large amounts, assess the same product, but then be able to roast it the same throughout the whole year. Once we roast coffee, we go into having a single origin, as we've mentioned, which is one bean from one particular farm around the world. Those beans will have very particular flavors that we love. One might be more acidic, one might be really body or earthy, and that's where we choose to roast them individually and specifically for their characteristics, and we blend them. So as we go through here, we have our blends. We start with our strongest, which is the not is fixed, not for the faint-hearted, and you can see it is a little bit darker than the next bean along, which is our champion blend. We call that our everyday hero. It's a big percentage of our business. That's all what our cafes use. Then we've got our delicate, which is our organic. We call it, it's a lifestyle product. A little bit lighter, a little bit more floral. It's a really nice, tasty coffee. Then we get into our decaf, and you can see here, it does have a little bit of oil on it because it has been broken down so much in its cell structures. It does roast a little bit differently. And on the end, this week, we have a Colombian Popayan regional coffee as our single origin. You can see it is quite lighter. Now that single origin is really designed for black coffee. We want to brew that as an espresso, a long black, or an alternative brew method, which we're going to cover in just a moment. You can see if we just come back to this couple of beans here, we talked about the crack. Okay, first crack. We don't go anywhere near a second crack. So this bean, you can see in the middle here, it does explode. You can see on that line, there's a little bit of chaff still, or that silver skin. That is the only part that's left. So we've got a really clean bean. You can see they're very smooth and beautifully roasted. So that's what we're trying to achieve. And if we go to second crack, that's when we start to get very just heavy bitter style coffee. So if you've chosen a lighter roasted coffee and it's oily, it means it's old. If you've got a very dark roasted coffee, it can be oily and still fresh. If it's very wet, it's probably dark roasted and very old. That'll give you a bit of a guide of what happens with coffee. What else do we have here? We're going to be moving through, I think I've gone on to that one. We've got some question times. Oh, no, we do have one other tool, which Jimmy has just pointed out. So we're talking about baking a cake, beautifully on the outside and beautifully on the inside. We have a light spectrometer. Now, what we do is we take this bean and we pop it into our little cage, and we'll fill that up and we will assess it. We're going to assess the external of the bean, and that is going to tell us how dark or light that color is. Then what we do is then we take that sample and we grind it, and that'll show us what the internal of that bean is like. So we can compare how well we've baked that cake on the outside and the inside, and measure the moisture again to ensure that we are doing the same thing over and over again. So that is such a precise assessment, and we can tell whether we've over roasted, under roasted, or if it's a new bean and we're sampling it out, we get to know that we haven't quite achieved what we wanted on the inside of that bean, or if we're finding it a bit too acidic, or there's just the wrong type of sugar, or white sugar rather than a caramelized sugar, we can really adjust those. So it is all number assessed, and that scale allows us to make changes with heat as per the roaster. So we've got a couple of questions. What have we got there? Tracy, have you got some there ready to go on the roasting process?
Yes, we do. We've got a sustainability related question, actually. Someone's asked,
Sure.
Are the beans fair trade?
Sure. So fair trade is a really great concept that has been put out and about. There's other organisations which would be organic and so on. We buy all of our coffees through either an accredited Australian importer, because we don't import beans essentially. Now, they can come as a fair trade product, an organic certified product, and we can choose which of those titles essentially that we want to label on our end bean. There's a lot of discussion about fair trade and whether that money actually gets back to the farmers to achieve what they really want to. There is a bit of a trend in the industry for larger roasters to have direct-to-farm relationships, and that's where we have a mix between the two. So our Colombian products, our PNG, and our Ethiopian products, we're actually dealing with members of the community, or even family members that are, and Brazil I should say, that are actually here in Australia, and we're buying from them, from their dad and their brothers and sisters over on the farms. And we're paying more for it. And in there's not a cut of the money that goes to the fair trade organisations and so on. So yes, there's a great reason why we want to have fair trade. It's the baseline minimum price that farmers should get, and we really love that. But by us going direct, we can actually pay more to the farmers, have a very more significant effect in the industry. So yeah, we balance those up. But I think 2 of our beans are fair trade, others are direct source. So
That's wonderful. And I mean, social justice across the board is, as you said, marketing labels aside, it's really important what work that you're doing. So thank you for that. Now, next question is, do you ever roast with the silver skin on? And if so, does it change the final roasting flavour?
Yes, so the silver skin, it's all about the bean and the process and how you're getting it. So these are washed coffees, and you can see there is some silver skin on here still. It doesn't always come off. You can see really quite there. So we want to look for a bean that's been processed better to remove that, because it can have a bit of a pithy taste into a bean. So when we roast, that actually does come out and is sucked out. Just actually, Jimmy shows me. We've cleaned up for the day, but it actually comes out through the back here and fills up this bag, and it's chaff. It's like a very fine layer in that bag. It's totally full of this amazing light, fluffy stuff that makes an absolute mess and goes everywhere. So you've got to make sure you catch it. So we try and not have silver skin is the key of buying a good quality bean.
Ooh, I'm just thinking I'll hit you up for that for my compost bins and web months later.
You and everyone else have to race here to get our extracted coffee grinds, but also that chaff. Everyone comes and grabs it for the local what are they called? Community growers market areas.
Yeah, awesome. The community gardens are important. So another question, can you explain again first and second crack and the endothermic and exothermic reaction from the heat, please?
Sure. So endothermic and exothermic. One is an internal explosion of heat that is coming out of that bean, and one is the internal heat that we're providing. So first crack is where it becomes the bean releasing its energy, and prior to that, we are providing energy. So that is happening at first crack, and it's also happening at second crack. So we monitor what happens. At first crack, it really does explode and changes those heats, and some beans love at that point putting more heat on the bean, and others actually have a very mild heat explosion, and then they actually need a softer heat being applied. So in our graph there, we can see that heat spike or drop off. There's a lot of debate what happens at that time in a roast, and whether you, it's called a crash, basically. The bean just drops right off on temperature and can kick back up. So there's some really trade secrets in there. We don't go to second crack because second crack for us is just way too dark, and it's just taking a beautiful product and wrecking it, basically.
Wow, that's very cool info. Can I just ask one more question, because we've just got
Sure.
one more question just through. I heard some people are now drying and roasting the whole cherry. Can you comment on that?
Sure. So in places where water isn't available to do what's called a wash coffee like we have here, we do have naturally processed coffee, which if we just take that cherry and either leave it on the tree to turn into a little prune, you can then have a timing of how those that mucilage and the caramelization that's happening from those the sugars in there actually impregnate into the bean. So that's a naturally processed coffee, and you can then either just mush that up and then dry it and send it out for sale, or the farmers can keep it in a fermentation process for a bit longer and have an anaerobic fermentation, which is a pretty cool new word getting around on coffee beans at the moment. Or you can leave it really sticky and let it dry out, and that's called a honey process. So we do have a beautiful honey processed coffee at the moment from Colombia called Mr. Yaseed, and that brings out some really sort of funky flavors into maybe like apricots and jammy notes that come over the top, which you don't tend to see with a washed coffee. So if we look for clean flavors in coffee, we go for washed. If we're looking for funky, different flavors, we would look for a natural coffee. And those natural coffees generally are used in black coffee, and washed are generally used in blends, which blends are designed to counteract the huge volumes of milk that we have in coffee.
Thanks for that, Luke.
Beautiful.
I think that's it for the questions. Now we're ready to move
Great.
on.
We're ready for Jimmy. We'll do a quick little move around here, Jimmy. Switcho. So, Jimmy, what led you to join the Artisti team?
So I spent the best 10 years of my life working behind a coffee machine up in Queensland, down in Sydney. I moved back to Coffs Harbour 7 years ago and was a part of opening a bunch of different cafes on the coast. So I spent a lot of time doing lots of volume, anywhere from 10 kilos a day on a coffee machine myself. I moved from coffee into graphic design, social media. And at that point, that's when I really got involved working in the background of Artisti as their graphic designer and marketer. And from there, Luke and I built a relationship around how he was going to build his brand. So I sat in the background, worked out of an agency, and we really developed a brand that was consistent across the board. And that brand is what we see now We rebranded 18 months ago, 2 years ago now. And that's what you see on our cards, you see that on our cups, you see it everywhere. And it's, it's not a cheap exercise to go through a branding process. The packaging that's involved in a coffee company. I have multiple customers. I have customers all the time asking me about, can we print our own cups? And the costs that are involved in that, you want to get it right. And really, Luke's spent a lot of time with me developing his products, but also the language around how he talks about his product, what we communicate to the public, and that's what I share with our customers now. So I joined the team at the end of last year, and now I get to share that experience of being as a barista, but also having that background as a barista, but also now in marketing. I can share that with our customers, so I'm able to help them with their interior design and their packaging. If they've got questions about how to do signage, and I'm working with our new accounts and all of our existing accounts to help them build their brand. I guess most people are aware of social media, but people really struggle to know the best ways to use it and how it really shares their vision of what they're trying to portray to their customers. We've developed our own set of rules there that we stick by, consistency in our photos, and we teach our accounts to do that. We help them develop a style in their photography and what message they want to share to their customers, and make sure that they start to build their own brand and their identity, and that's what people can really connect to. So aside from serving great coffee, you want to build a reputation as a great place, and we're able to help our accounts do that.
And how much impact have you had in this business, Jimmy?
I would like to say I've had a fair impact on this business. Luke's always had a great product. He's always had a great vision, and I think I've been able to help articulate that for him through visuals and through messaging. And that's a big part of us now. Over the next couple of years, we really just worked on our catch cry and our vision and mission statement not that long ago to be empowering baristas and business owners. And we're proving that through sessions like this where we give people an insight into how we do things. Our YouTube channel is blowing up because people are appreciating that we're sharing our knowledge. We do free training with all of our wholesale accounts because we know the value of that training to those wholesale accounts and how. And that's, the coffee industry can be quite secretive, and we feel it's a great asset to us and our customers and our community. We're not keeping that just within our accounts, we're also sharing that with the community, reminding people in to have chats. And I think that's really starting to take off through our retail sales. We've been able to open multiple new cafes during COVID. So we're looking forward to a big couple of years as we launch after COVID. We're going to come out even stronger, and that's really where we're going to see the value in the next few years. Sure.
Awesome. Thanks, Jimmy. We'll do a quick handover here, mate.
Yeah.
As we head on back this way. This is into our little room again, our little showroom out the front, which at the moment, this is our little training room, which we do set up. We make sure it's a bit of a mess at the moment because we can't offer training in-house with the social distancing rules. But we will set up our cafes with all of their gear, make sure they're fully trained before they open from day one. That is crucial. You only get one chance to make your first impression, as they say, but making sure that your baristas are ready, everyone's serving a great cup of coffee. We're very mindful of that before we actually let people get our brand. So it's also a part of how the equipment needs to be set up. People need to know how to use it. So we just wanted to show you today and have a beautiful cup of coffee with you and explain why we have this kind of equipment. So measurement in coffee is so huge. We've talked about that preciseness we have in our roasting facility, but it's also got to be outweighed through here to make a beautiful coffee, but also look after the costs. Because you want to have profitable coffee. You don't want to have a lot of waste. So the biggest change in the industry over the last probably 5 years has been weight-based assessment. Now, we have here a Anthem grinder. It's a big flat burr grinder. It's very accurate, and we are weighing every single amount of coffee that goes in. We're then making sure that we disperse that coffee beautifully, because we want to make sure that it is evenly distributed in the coffee handle. So we have things like an OCD. These are pretty cool little units. I'll show you how we go. We're going to just talk about this and we'll come back and make a coffee. Then tamping pressures. People ask us all these different things about how to tamp it. A puck press can standardize that pressure beautifully. When you come into a coffee machine, this is an Italian-made La Marzocco. We're going to have things like beautiful, nice big baskets and beautiful buttons that allow us to not only control the volume of water, but also the temperature of that water, because we are having a lot of science happening in here. Through the whole process, there's 800 chemical reactions that we're trying to either increase or decrease to make a beautiful cup at the end. These are a double boiler machine, and they give us so much consistency and cooler. So you can see little things like that handle being tapered, because if you're going to be working on a machine day in, day out, there are a lot of things you've got to look after yourself with. And then you've got things like your steam pressure. So really nice, beautiful, clean steam is going to help you make great milk. As we come across here, we'll just point out iMilk. This is the product that we developed. It is a weight-based delivery of milk. So there's a couple of factors here of being able to put a jug on. It knows the actual weight of this jug, and we've got a preset amount of weight, which is going to dose the exact amount of milk that we want in there for a small cappuccino cup. If we want a flat white, we would just pass our sensor and it'll give us a top up, because we don't have as much foam in a flat white over a cappuccino. Not only can we then go and make the beautiful cup, we've got a saving on the other end here where we're using far less bottles. So this system actually uses a bladder. Milk comes in 10-litre bladders, and it's all plumbed for full cream and light milk, and it goes straight up into the tap. So the staff aren't lifting and moving bottles all day or having to have multiple milk bottles. Using a bladder like that, it actually has the same amount of plastic as one 2-litre bottle. So we're actually saving 4 plastic bottles by using the bladders. Unfortunately, they are soft plastic, so they're not fully recyclable unless you put them into those specific places. But obviously the industry is trying to fix that one as well. Another cool thing is this has an automatic hands-free jug washer. So it automatically washes the jugs. Don't have as many jugs around. Definitely helps with the food safety side of things, going from soys to almonds and alternative milks as well. So it's a lot of tech that happens in there. So let's make a coffee. I'm getting thirsty. So we're going to tear our scales. We're going to activate the grinder. We have a brew recipe, and our brew recipe is 22.5 grams. So look at that, 22.6. So we're happy with 0.1 of a gram out. Our coffee handles need to be clean and dry and hot. And that means that we're going to be brewing all of that water temperature straight into the coffee. So we would use this beautiful little dosing pot, pop it onto the handle, turn it upside down, a little bit of a swirl and a bit of a tap. You can see that the coffee there is not as level. We'd like to just shift that over and use the dosing tool, the OCD distributing tool. By popping it on, giving it a bit of a spin, it's now allowed that coffee to flatten out. To be honest, I'd like just a little bit more of a tap on that one. And now we're going to be tamping, taking the person out of the pressure change. It's going to automatically tamp it and have it a little bit below under that basket. Now we ensure that there is a bed of water that's going to come in and pressurize and make its way evenly through that coffee. A lot of people use way too much coffee and have too coarse a grind. So I'd urge you, if you've got that inclination to learn more, check out our YouTube videos. There is so much on this side of the actual industry that we're sharing at the moment. We want to flush to make sure that we don't have any of the old grinds in there, and also that helps get the right temperature for the next coffee that's going to be made, because we do want to have standardized temperatures coming through our heads. So we'll pop that in. We're going to make 2 little cups for you here. I'm going to duck over. We've already got our milk, which is great. Now, I actually don't want that, to be honest. I'm going to go back and pour out the amount that I had a flat white, so I'm back to where I want to be for a cappuccino. We're going to purge. We're going to get the milk spinning beautifully, lowering it to get a constant little hiss, lifting it up to get no hiss. And when it's warm, at 40 degrees, then count 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3, and turn it off. And we're going to hit 65. Now we've just released, I think we're 2 videos into our 4-part video series on how to froth milk. There's some amazing tips there for you all. We've got our 2 beautiful coffees there. Bring those over. Tap to swirl our milk to make it beautiful and silky. I'm going to swirl that espresso, get in low, put around that cup. Nice and low, a bit of a wiggle. Okay. There's a little heart with a bit of a tulip base. I'm just going to quickly grab another milk. I know you want to see something really more into that one. We don't want to sit that espresso for too long. Timing is crucial. Always got to purge to get the steam out. Sorry, the milk out after the steam. But beforehand, there's water that builds up in there. That's something that a lot of people forget about. I'm going to swirl our espresso. I'm going to get in there. Around the cup. Just missed the little heart tail there, I'm sorry. There is a rosetta with a floating heart off the top of it. We love to free pour. We don't do much etching, but what this allows us to do is get the sweetness of the milk and blend it with those flavors of the coffee. So when you drink, you actually get a little bit of that coffee flavor from the crema, then the sweetness of the actual foam. And by layering it like that, you're getting a much better experience. And you should always drink a coffee from the bottom of a pattern. So that's definitely something that I'd recommend. If you're getting a takeaway, don't let the sipper go at the back here because it's going to be very strong and tarty. Not the best part of the coffee when it's poured. The other quick thing we want to just look at is single origins and coffee and alternative brew methods. The industry is heavily focused on espresso, but in the specialty market, we have things like a deli grinder here, which allow us to do multiple different grinds from different blends. So we have all of our different coffees, our decaf and our single origins, all separated, pre-weighed to 23.5 grams. As we pop them in, we can then use that to brew it in different ways. So we can have a nice filter batch brew. Moving along, we've got a siphon brewer here, or a pour over. We do a nitro coffee, which is pretty cool if you haven't had one. It's a cold brewed coffee infused with nitrogen. Then we go into portable style coffees where you'd have obviously a kettle to provide very specific temperatures of water through a different type of brewing device. This is the AeroPress, which just everywhere for traveling. They're a great plunger style brew method. You actually put the coffee in and you're forcing that into a cup. And then from there, you go down a whole different world of cold drippers and more brewers as well. So that just allows a whole different experience. And I urge you to work out what you love about coffee, whether it be strong or the light flavors, the florals, and then try and play with a few of these different brewing methods because you might not love espresso. If you're a milk coffee drinker, yeah, espresso is great. But if you love subtle flavors or drink black coffee, definitely this alternative brew method is the way to go. Yeah, what else, Jimmy? I think that might get us pretty close. I think that's about it. We're into question time, guys. So we're going to quickly move over to here. Jimmy to pop it into our little camera rest here. Sorry for a quick camera transfer here.
Just getting a little bit of feedback, guys. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay. Do you want me to start asking questions?
Yeah, let's get into it. Yep.
Do you spend money to advertise on social media or do you let it grow organically?
Yeah, good question. In the past, I let it grow organic, and you only have so much success when you're doing that. we've got a very targeted approach with Jimmy coming on board now, and we are very strategic in our whole marketing plan. Our YouTube content may be about milk frothing. So in alignment on our website, we would be having things like milk jugs and thermometers on sale, and then we are promoting those. So we are now putting money towards our advertised products for sale. We're not paying for people to look at our YouTube channel because we know that is an area where we're trying to educate people. We're not trying to sell in that space. So understanding those things and knowing where to market to, where to put the money to have the effect is very crucial. And that's what Jimmy's been doing a great job at.
Yeah, traditionally it's always been an organic reach, and that's what's grown the brand locally. It's definitely a bit of work to do as we reach outside of COFs, and we're moving into spaces that we don't already have a reputation for, but also just new markets, new products that we haven't built up any SEO, built up any recognition, and have a digital presence on those products. And that's, we've seen some great results from some of the spends. We've seen terrible results from some spends. It's something that we know. We actually prefer to go organic, I guess, because the content that you produce in the organic space is much more authentic, and that's really what people want to see these days.
You produce the content that you know the person who's going to attach to it. We can pick a very specific demographic or a location. If we're trying to get a cafe in an area, we can put marketing to them. That's a very different product to, I guess, the domestic market and the lifestyle brand building we're trying to do.
Yes. Once you start talking about paying for ads, you tend to go into a price point space, and it's just not a fun place to play in. We like to play in value, and we want people to come to us and see our content. And then if we build ourselves enough of a brand that people rely on our advice and think that we're worth listening to, then they should buy our coffee. Yeah, because they believe what we believe in, and they trust in our knowledge, and they'll go and buy that product from us, as opposed to hunting through the internet and finding the person that's got paying the top dollar for the top ad. That's not really a fun space to play in. So organic's always better.
Thanks for that. For some reason, we're still getting a little bit of feedback from you guys. Is there another microphone or speaker somewhere?
Yeah, I changed. My headphones ran out of battery, and now we've got this. So
here you go, Jimmy. If you just take those out, get rid of them.
I'm sorry, guys.
Sorry.
The joy of live feeds. I mean, I must say too, one of the things that I love about these guys, I've known Luke's business for about 10 years since I moved here in Coffs Harbour, and yeah, they're authentic and real, and their coffee's done good. So I think it's a credit to them that they do go down the organic marketing route rather than anything else. Now, I've just got a question for you in relation to grinders. There's can you please say the brand for the grinder again? It's interesting that it weighs at the same time without having to weigh separately, please.
Okay, so that is an Anthem SP2 grinder. It is not a weight-based grinder. We have a separate rest, which allows us to put what's called an Achaia scale on there, and that weighs the grind. That Achaia scale can be Bluetooth and connected across the platforms if you need to. So you can use an app to measure what's happening with brew methods. So that's a manual kind of process. There are grinders that actually will weigh the actual coffee as it's coming out. And if you're looking down that process, you would look at a Ferranzato grinder. They would be the leader in that industry at the moment.
Thank you for that. I might get that off you, and I'll send that out as a message for anyone that's interested. Another question. Thank you. Connor Dillon, sorry, why don't more cafes use open or naked group head handles to help with the visual inspection of the pour and the flow directly into the cup rather than over the metal, please?
So the double spouts that you're talking about, or no one uses single spouts anymore. There's just so much in this space inside a basket and what basket you use. We've got a huge video and it's gone viral, over 200,000 views on that one video, which Joel did, so check that out. Essentially, all this is doing is a splitter. It's splitting into 2 cups. So if a cafe is using small cups and they want to split those shots, you have to go this line. If you're going to use it naked, you really need to focus on your extraction. It is going to definitely make a barista make a great coffee or a bad coffee, because how you distribute, as we showed with that OCD, the actual amount of coffee, the grind, the age of the coffee, all those things are going to affect with a naked. So there's a lot of people that don't have the skill to be able to do that. Let's be honest about it. And it can be a little bit messy if you're not getting it spot on and being busy. So it's probably not for the average cafe. Definitely someone who's going for the top end, that would be the way to go. I use them at home. I think the team mainly uses them, but we spend a bit more time in making sure that coffee's perfect to be able to use nakeds.
Thank you very much for that. Now, I've got a question. What recipe do you use with AeroPress?
Good question. Our video outlines that very specifically. What they give you is little scoops. And the scoops are the best thing to measure. So what they say is one of their scoops to one of their numbers.
So that's a 14 gram scoop per 1 cup. So the thing with an AeroPress, you'll find, depends on how you prefer to brew that particular method. The original, the build of an AeroPress has gone to the wayside, and people have kind of gone their own way about brewing with an AeroPress. There is numbers on the side that indicates how many cups of coffee you actually get out of an AeroPress. But if you spend any time brewing an AeroPress, you'll see that people have kind of stopped looking at the numbers and they'll just brew themselves 1 cup. So someone will create their own recipe and they will brew 1 cup out of that. Technically, this is supposed to brew 4 cups, so we've got the new AeroPress Go coming in. That's just been reduced in size down to a 3 cup, but you're essentially creating more of a concentrate of coffee in that.
And then topping it up with hot water.
Topping it up with hot water.
And just on AeroPress, there's 2 ways to use it. You can add your coffee in and your water to the ratio. So 1 scoop to each number. Pop on your lid, depress it to get the air out. Pop your cup on, and then press it down into a cup. That's the inverted method. If you read the manual, they talk about it like this. You have your filter already engaged, usually a paper filter in the box. Pop it on your cup, put your coffee in, add your water on, then depress. It's a very different flavour and different process, but that allows you to do more cups and that concentrated rather than an individual brew, which is the inverted method. We all use the inverted method, but that's our choice.
Yeah, we do. And the general rule of 60 to 70 grams per litre. If you're making it normal, you just do the ratios down.
Thank you. Just 2 more questions. So what's the temperature for your nitro coffee? I find that some are not cold as I expect it to be.
Sure, good point. What happens with nitro, it should be as a refrigerated barrel. So it's definitely around that 2 to 3 degrees mark. What you're experiencing is the lack of volume that shop is possibly not using. And the actual head itself will store an unrefrigerated amount of nitro. So it's best to purge that out. I know we purge it out. We always give people that purged warmer liquid goes down the drain, and then we give a beautiful, nice cold cup. If you're going to have someone that's serving it, they might put it on ice. I think ice wrecks the nitro personally. So we want to give that nice cold cup. So maybe just make a note if that's where you're getting it from. That's probably the issue.
Thank you for that. Sorry, I was typing while I was doing that. I was listening. One more question. You mentioned your grams were, 22.5. What's the grams
Sure.
out on the, is it the La Marzocco? Sorry about that.
Marzocco, yep. So an extraction out yield, is that what you're asking?
It said, the question is from Linda, you mentioned your grams were 22.5. What's the grams out of the La Marzocco? And she said,
La
yes.
Marzocco.
Up
Yeah.
us.
Okay. So we have two ratios. We only use the same amount of coffee in. We don't have single handles, so we're always putting 22.5 grams in. We're either choosing to run it as a ristretto, which is a 1-to-1 ratio. So if we're going to pass water through that for a cup, we're going to get 22.5 grams of liquid weight in that cup. If we're looking for what you might call a double shot, we're looking for 2 times that ratio, and that will give you the 45 grams of liquid weight at the end. That can be very specific to grinders. So if you've got like a Mazza rover or things like that, or a conical blade grinder, you can get that 45 grams quite easy. What we do find with something like an Anthem, which is a larger flat blade grinder, when you push that far, it just can get a little bit of over extraction. So we're probably coming back to getting 42, maybe 42.5 grams, because the grind quality is so much better, which gives you more surface area as you're passing water through it. So you technically need to extract less of it. We have a video, I believe, on how to build your own brew recipe, so you can get all that information as well.
Thanks so much, Luke. I've just had lots of sort of thank yous and everything, and I think everyone thinks this is quite awesome. I've just realised how much I don't know about coffee, so my head wants
We're
to.
skimming the surface.
Yeah.
We're not to sprig our YouTube channel too much more, but we realised that we need to share what we're doing, and it's getting uptake really well. And the feedback we get is, wow, no one's ever told us this. We didn't know we could get access to it. Yeah, we've been sharing it with our customers for quite some time. So I think that's definitely a space for people to learn more. And we are very active, so we want to answer your questions. I think we answer every question that comes in through social media, and we do try and produce the content from those questions as well.
Thank you. You're getting a lot of love, I must say. So we've got people from all over the place, but people that are in New South Wales are promising to stop by next time they're up here as well. I'm getting hearts and thank yous and all sorts of things right now. So thank
we
you.
do have something we want to offer everyone for attending. There is a code, TAFE Coffee 10. It's going to be up very shortly, and you can jump on our website and we'll give you 10% off all of our coffee. Yeah, and then if you love it, get into a subscription. That's another amazing deal, which will look after you long term with free freight Australia-wide and a great price as well.
Wow, that's amazing. Thank you. Well, I'll be taking you up on that. Thank you very much. All right.
I don't know where you're going to time. I've got to watch, but I'm pretty close. Go on.
Come under.
I'll come under.
Yeah.
Oh,
You did well. Thank you.
yeah.
So I'll leave you guys close because it's your floor right now.
Yeah, how long we got?
Yeah, we can
Yeah,
do that. Yeah.
Great. Would anyone like to have an alternative brew? I'm going to do a quick AeroPress or a V60, or can I demonstrate anything?
I'll just ask everyone, can you just let me know on the chat if there's anything in particular you'd like Jimmy and Luke to demonstrate before you leave, please, guys?
I'll do another shameless plug, but I'm wearing the beautifully designed by the lovely Jimmy Nothing Ever Happens Without coffee shirt.
I love it.
We're going to do a whole range of shirts out of our branding. They come in black or white. We obviously have our merch. We've got beanies as well coming from winter.
Tap dancing soon. I haven't got any specific requests, so maybe if you want to do another demo of something that you haven't presented, and then we might sign off, I think.
Sounds great. Black coffee. Let's make a long black.
Long black, thank you.
Because it is very different. So there is some very small remnants available, just of a Mr. You See Catastininda. I can never replace that right, but that is a Colombian anaerobic natural fermented coffee. It is beautiful. So that is a much more expensive coffee than we would normally use as single origin. It's the second time we've roasted that. So if we're going to make that as a long black, you really want to look after that coffee. So we're going to use our other deli grinder here. It's already weighed up, ready to go. We actually do 23 grams, just a smidge more because this is a much more accurate grinder. So the better the grinder, the better the consistency of grind particle size you have, which gives you better flavour essentially. So this is a commercial deli grinder. We have a product which is totally sold out in Australia and I believe all over the world called a niche grinder. So if you're a person who really loves to have variable coffees and change it all the time, your partner might have decaf and you love a milk-based coffee and you don't want to be changing the hoppers all the time, you would go and get a niche straight away. It's a very small, petite, beautiful little grinder. Again, so we're cleaning that one. Tamping again, nice and low. You can see it is much lighter colour, so much lighter roast. Smells beautiful. The long black is not for us designed to be hot. So we're going to pinch our boiling water. Here's a hot little tip: is just bringing it down to a cooler temp. You don't want the air to oxidise on the long black. We're going to do the ristretto. So the brew recipe is 23 grams. And we're going to be stopping this nice and short. And I'm lifting the cup up so that extraction is floating on the top of the water there. And you can see how rich and dark that is. Okay, once you've got a good crema, you can drop it. And we just have a look at our time here. We're going to stop it really short, 21 seconds. You don't want to over extract that in such a small cup. And you can see here, that squiggly line through there is the sugars that have come out of that coffee. It's very sweet and full-bodied. And that is at a temperature we can drink it now because the air will oxidise it. I would just do this a little bit just to get those flavours all the way through the cup. And drink it. Amazing. I'm sorry you can't enjoy it right now, but beautiful. There's a really nice sweetness that comes through there. A little bit of passion fruit and a bit of apricot as well. And black coffee, as it cools, will actually bring a different profile to coffee as well. So we assess all of our coffees in a thing called cupping each week. And that is basically a black style coffee. And that's how we assess and come up with the flavours that you might see on our coffee cards. So when we start to say that there is milk, chocolate, soft tropical fruits and cacao in this Popayan coffee, usually coming from our quality assessment happening each week, not so much the espresso side, because we don't know if you're going to use alternative brewing, long blacks, or milk-based coffee, because milk changes that flavour of a cup dramatically. And that's usually where we get those tasting profiles from.
I'm so ordering a long black next time I come.
So cooling it down, the best way to do it.
Thank you. There's
Did
no
any
further
questions come out of that?
No, nothing at the moment. People are
Beautiful.
sort of, yeah, I'm just sort of panning down as I speak to you. Sorry, on my computer disable download. Oh, okay. I've got some technical questions about ticketing, but nothing about the coffee making process. So I think that's a wrap, guys.
Beautiful. From Jimmy, myself, and all the team here in Artisti, thank you very much for joining us today. And we'd love to hear from you if you've got any other questions. And yeah, hope you enjoy your coffee journey. Get out there and enjoy beautiful coffee. Try and find the one that you love. And like I said, we can help you with coffee, whether it's training, starting a cafe, or just trying to get more knowledge. Please, touch base, and we'll love to chat to you.
thank you. I'd just like to thank you on behalf of Misha and Tracy from TAFE New South Wales. This was a test event for our Cert 3 event students and Diploma of Event students, and myself and Nisha as teachers, and our partnership with Artisti on this one. So thank you all for participating today. Technical glitches aside, I think it went really well. So thank you very much for being here.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the opportunity. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Luke. Thank you, Jimmy. You've been amazing.
Thanks, Tracy.
Bye for
Thanks, Luke. Thanks, Jimmy. Great
Thanks,
presentation.
Cheers.